Alright, so what's going on, guys? So in today's video, we got a couple things that we need to get done. But the main thing is going to be replacing the blown turbo in the Galant. So of course you guys know that I had an eBay GTX 35R tore it apart after it blew, or after I blew actually two of them, and we found out that it's not an actual ball bearing turbo, just a journal bearing. I thought I fixed the issue by just removing the restrictor. It turns out that wasn't the case. Now one thing I don't think I mentioned in that video about me turning the turbo down was that the restrictor I bought was from the same company for that turbo. Went ahead and picked up this guy. So what I have here is a Precision 6266. This is a standard journal bearing turbo. As you can see, I still have the T3 housing. It is the 86AR exhaust housing. Now if we notice, I did have it coated, ceramic coated, so it has a heat coating on it, so I won't need a heat blanket or anything like that on it. So getting the turbine housing coated is actually cheaper than a quality turbo blanket, and of course it doesn't take up any extra space, nothing extra to worry about. You do have to be careful with this stuff. It's not like a powder coat where it's real thick. You can't scratch it, which is more of an aesthetic thing, but you know, it is what it is. It'll help manage some of that heat. So like I said, so this guy right here, I guess first thing, do a big shout out to Real Street Performance. I called them up. They happen to have one of these in stock. Very few places had these in stock, you know, at the time of me buying this. But Real Street down in Florida, I called them up. Of course, they said they had plenty of them in stock, and they actually got this thing shipped out to me the same day that I paid for it. And 3 days later, it was at my door. It actually took longer for me to get the housing coated and get it back to me than it took for the turbo to actually get here. So big shout out to Real Street. I do want to say, even though it did take a while, big shout out again to Detective Coating in Richmond, Virginia. Again, if you are local, you can check them out for all your like ceramic coating and powder coating needs. They are the company that I will be doing my coating with going forward. Of course, it's not sponsored, but it just promoted a local small business. They powder coated a few other parts. Like normally the turnaround is pretty quick, but they got backed up when I happened to drop this off. But anyway, it's no big deal. The coating looks good. Custom service is pretty good, so nothing to worry about there. So we're just gonna get this guy swapped onto here. So now there shouldn't be much to do to get this swapped over because these turbos are pretty much the same size. They both have the 4-inch inlet. They're both T3, as I mentioned. They both have the 86AR. They're both V-band out. So this should be a direct swap. Now, one thing I do know, and one thing I'm really looking forward to, is that this guy is going to make a lot more power than this guy at the same boost levels. So in addition, this should spool faster. We're looking for, you know, anywhere from 300 to 500 RPM sooner at the same boost level. But of course, like I said, being that this is a better turbo, I shouldn't have to run as much boost. So of course, you guys know that I was running about 26 pounds of boost. It would spike to around 28 in like fourth gear, but around 26, it was looking at like 450 or so wheel horsepower according to the virtual dyno. Now, like I said, you can merit that however you want to. It is what it is. It's just a number for you guys to throw out there. And of course, this thing should last longer than 200 miles. So if I did mention it, and I don't think I did, like I said, this thing lasted about 200 miles, which was longer than the other ones before it gave up. And that was 200 miles at 26 pounds of boost. Every time I took this thing out, I took it out and I hit full boost, and it stayed at full boost most of the time. So it held up for a little bit. You can see it still does spin freely, so it's not like anything inside of it is too bad. It's just the oil seals, I guess, are blown and it is not making power. It does have a good amount of shaft play. So of course the thing with going with a cheap turbo is you end up spending more money on a lot of those parts. A lot of times if I add up the total of my Galant, I'll get to that another build, but it's a lot more than it will cost you to actually replicate the build had it had been done right in the first place. So I'll go over that in a later video, probably sometime here soon. As long as I can get the car running for more than a couple of days, then that's what we're going to go to. It's cheaper just to do it right in the first place. Now I know some people say, well, this eBay turbo does good, this one does good, this one, so on and so forth. This Precision turbo is only about $1,100. Like the good quality eBay turbos that I've seen, like the Pulsars and stuff, are about $700. So in my mind anyway, that difference is not worth the chance you take for getting a bad turbo. This turbo I didn't pay anything for. The one that I had before this, which was the exact same turbo, I did have to pay $150 as a replacement because this turbo, this original cast wheel one, I paid like $220 for, and it blew. And then a year later, I contacted the company and they told me they would send me out a new one for $150. So again, not a bad deal from that company. Like, but if I had to buy all those things separately, you're looking at $220 for the first one, like $600 for the second one, $600 for the third one. You can see how those prices really add up when I can just get a precision that would have lasted anyway for $1,100. I know exactly what to expect. I know what it is. So and it would save me a lot of time and a lot of headache, which is really the kind of most important part, is all that wasted time that I had messing with these turbos. So I got the turbo kit removed. The good thing about, of course, the 4G motors and the way they're set up, and in the Galant and the Eclipse specifically, is that there's so much space in the engine bay. You can just pull this whole thing out as a kit. So you see the manifold, wastegate, dump tube is all still connected. I just had to loosen the drain, the bottom intercooler piping, and the feed. You know, and it comes right out. So if you guys remember, we did weld like an angled spacer to the manifold. So with that, only issue I've had is that the bolts are a little hard to get to now because they had to go in at an angle. But again, that's not that big a deal. This is just a 1/2-inch spacer that I got off of Amazon, eBay, somewhere. We cut it down at an angle, and then Trey welded it for me to the manifold with the side that we cut facing up. And it gave me the necessary block clearance that I need to fit a turbo. So of course, you know, on these 4G motors, of course, with the starter being on the front, and most of these manifolds that we're using are for the Evo, your turbo hits the starter. So you can either use like a couple spacers on the head, or I went for this look because I don't like the way that looks. But as made, like I said, this has worked out just fine, hasn't leaked. I see it was TIG welded. Like, so in addition, we're gonna replace the radiator. I did pick up an aluminum radiator for the Evo 6. So we're gonna go ahead and swap that out as well, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. Replace your OEM radiator with a Mishimoto or aftermarket aluminum radiator. It's a pretty simple process. Of course, first you'll need to drain the fluid that's inside of it. You can just remove the hose that's at the bottom and on the top. There are your two brackets at the top. I believe they're held in by two 12mm bolts on both sides, and you just have to unplug this big guy here. This other plug actually goes to this fan, so you don't need to remove it because it's still attached. Then what I have here is a Mishimoto radiator. This is for an Evo 5, 6 or something like that. The biggest difference between this and like an Evo 8 radiator is that on the Evo 6s, the fill point is actually here. So if you can picture your engine bay now, your thermostat housing is pretty much directly behind this, which is why I wanted to get one from an Evo 6 as opposed to the Evo 8, because the Evo 8 puts it right about here, pretty much where the Galant is. So it really doesn't make sense that they would do that when they could have had a straight shot to the thermostat housing as opposed to having to bring the hose across. It's really more of an aesthetic piece, but of course, when it's here, it does have to go around your exhaust manifold or turbo manifold. So a couple of reasons I want to upgrade to a Mishimoto. One, if you can't already tell, it is used. I got a great deal on it. For about $100 less than new, I got the radiator, which is in great shape, plus an authentic Mishimoto fan. So I do have one fan that came with it. It's not attached to it right now, but yeah, and of course with these, you always want to confirm Mishimoto will have their little stamp that says lifetime warranty and a part number on the side, as well as should be embossed here too. So it's an authentic radiator. I saved $100 plus I got a free fan. This is the way I'm looking at it. My car was running a little bit hot, not overheating, but a little hot. And being that the weather is getting warmer, I want to take the precaution to get that under control before we start seeing like some 90+ degree weather. So just real quick, we can look at it. See that this guy is about 2 inches thick, whereas your OEM radiator is about 3/4 of an inch thick. So less than half the thickness between your new performance radiator and your factory radiator. That's what I'm going to attempt to do is actually remove the shroud off of back here, and those are these guys here, the things that are around the fans, and put it onto this. Now, the reason you want to do that, of course, you could just slap a fan on it, which is how it was being run. So basically, the shroud makes the whole thing perform just a little bit better by maximizing the fan's effort. Now, I didn't buy the shroud for this. Of course, they do make one, and I probably will end up getting it eventually, but I don't have it in yet. So I'm going to attempt to use my OEM shroud. So this thing is held in just with a couple bolts. Look here. So should be able to take this off and figure out some way, probably zip ties, to attach it to this guy and then drop it back in. Now, before I do that, I do want to go over to the car because these pegs that are on the bottom are not, or I don't believe are going to fit into the same mounting brackets as OEM one. Now the easiest way to tell, of course, and line it up. And if we look, so if we line those two up, we see that this one is maybe an inch and a half or so off of where it needs to be. So it's not a huge deal, but looks like we may end up needing to move one of those brackets. All right, so now that I got the radiator laying on some padding, I'm gonna go ahead and see how well this shroud is gonna fit. I would love to just be able to use my stock components just for a quick install, but more than likely that's not how this is gonna work. Now you can see he already soldered the plug onto it, but you can always just cut off your factory plug and connect a new one. That way it fits into your factory fan module. This way everything will act pretty much as OEM, with the computer or your ECU will control when the fan comes on. A lot of guys will also just wire it to a switch with a relay directed to your battery and have the fans on anytime the car is on. So what I'm going to do, like I said, is go ahead and use my 1 bolt hole to mount my bigger fan and see what my clearance looks like, and I see what adjustments need to be done. Looks like we're in luck. We do have enough clearance to run this one fan shroud. Now the one on this side looks like it is going to be a bit tight. Now of course I can move my dump tube. I can actually turn it back this way. And I was thinking about just using this fan that came with it and seeing if it'll fit down here. Of course, as I showed you guys, it is already wired up or to connect to the factory module. So it looks like everything's going to work out. Now even with the radiator just sitting in one post on the bottom, it's in here pretty good. But yeah, just initial fitment, everything looks good to go. Very little work that's need to be done. All right, guys, so you can see I got the turbo off of the manifold, and like I said, these guys are pretty much the same. So if you look at them from the side, you can see that the precision is a little bit bigger or a little bit taller, and it looks like most of that comes from just the exhaust housing. So these exhaust housings are supposed to be the same size. These are both 86AR exhaust housings, but just at least externally, you can see that this one is a lot bigger than this one. And I'm not really going to take these apart and show you the differences. Of course, you would expect the precision to be a little bit higher quality, or a lot higher quality, because it does cost, you know, twice as much as this one. But I do want to say that something I did like about the precision is that on the inside of the compressor cover, there is an O-ring that seals it to the compressor cover. Well, on this one there isn't. Like, so precision does make it really easy to identify their turbos based off the name. So a 6266 is going to be a turbo with a 62mm compressor wheel and a 66mm turbine wheel. Whereas this Garrett GTX, like, so this guy here is supposed to have a 62mm compressor. But as you can see, that wasn't the case. It is quite a bit smaller than it was advertised to be. And there's one more thing I want to look at, because I will be redoing my oil drain. Of course, when you're doing an oil drain on a turbo, you want to use a minimum of a 10 AN fitting. Now I had used this setup here. Of course, it does have a 90 on it, which is a mark for debate, so I will be removing this 90 and going with another 45. It was just easier to run this, but I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make this utilize a 45-degree bend, which I already do have. But you have to be careful with your fittings. So just like the turbo itself, you do have to be careful with some of this cheaper stuff, because as I'm about to show you here in a second, what they claim the specs to be may not be the specs. But I'm going to show you a comparison between a precision oil drain fitting and another cheaper oil drain fitting that I happen to have on me. So like I said, guys, here I have two oil drain fittings. They're both 10 AN, but actually quite different in size. So on the left I have just like a cheapo Amazon unit, and on the right I have a precision unit. So right off the bat you can see that the drain hole on the precision is actually quite a bit bigger than the drain hole on the cheap unit. But as you can see, I'm not going to screw that all the way in there. As you can see, it does screw in. It does fit. And these are 10 AN fittings. It's just the inner diameter is a lot smaller. And that's really the important part. That's what's going to help your turbo flow. So of course we flip it over. We can see the precision unit has an O-ring to help it seal. So you actually don't need to run a gasket with this guy. And it has a much bigger hole than this guy. But this would definitely restrict the flow for your drain. So this would definitely cause you a problem if you're thinking you're running a 10 AN line, but then you have, you know, a 6 AN opening. Definitely going to cause you some problems in the future. And this black one is a precision fitting. It costs like 30 bucks or more. This is a cheapo, like eBay, Amazon fitting that costs like 10 bucks. So you truly get what you pay for. So of course the point there is, you know, when I got into the Galant build, I initially did it to do a budget build and show you guys what you could do relatively inexpensively. And what I have found out is that, just like everybody says, it is a lot easier just to do it right the first time and save yourself a ton of headache. Of course, I got the Galant 2 years ago, and up until this point, it is still stock motor, stock trans, just with a turbo kit slapped on it. And it's taken me 2 years and a lot of money to get to that point, just because I've had to deal with issues like this. So if you plan on doing something like this, as I've said before, do the maintenance on the car first. Check the sensors, wear items, your belts, and then start saving up to replace or to turbo the car with good quality parts, and you will save yourself a ton of downtime. Because to be honest, I could get the car to where it is now, performance-wise, in about a weekend. It might be a 3-day weekend, but I could get it there pretty quickly. I had already figured out all these issues ahead of time and just taken my time and bought quality parts from the beginning. But lesson learned. This is the direction we're going to move forward with the Galant, and of course with this guy back here. We're going to try to avoid having those missteps. So like I said, now I'm going to go ahead and just get this guy attached onto my manifold, and we're going to get it installed and hopefully get the car started and running today, because we will need to retune the car, because like I said, this turbo should make more horsepower per boost level. So fortunately, it is early in the day. We got plenty of daylight, so let's get to work. All right, guys, so we're all done. We got the new turbo installed along with the new radiator. I did go ahead and use the one electric fan, and it gave me plenty of clearance between my dump tube. Didn't have to move a whole lot. I was also able to keep my stock fan in the stock module and wire it up like it should come from the factory. So that's a big plus. Kind of keeps things simple. Now I was only able to keep one bolt in just because this radiator is a little bit shorter than the factory radiator, like I showed you guys earlier. But on the other side, I was able to get both of them in, and the post on the bottom of the radiator on this side is actually inside of the bracket on the radiator support, whereas the one on the other side isn't. Now I did drive it around already. It seems like it's holding just fine. It's not rattling. So with just those 3 points of contact.